Today, I'm going to tell you a cock and bull story. There is the bull, and
That wasn't gratuitous cocking about. I'm illustrating a point. Fact is, the best comedy often comes from the unexpected and the absurd. And the Lamborghini LM002 delivers.
this is a 6,800-pound four-door, four-wheel drive pickup with a V12. A dogleg 5-speed manual. 20 inches of suspension travel.
Oh, my back.
And it carries 76.6 gallons of gas. The rear bucket seats are bomb. Literally, because the base of each seat is a 38-gallon fuel tank.
Speaking of bombing, this Lamborghini once made it onto Time magazine's list of the worst cars ever, having nothing to do with the car itself, but because of its, quote, appalling clientele.
Including Saddam Hussein's son and Tina Turner. Stay tuned for the story behind the most fraudulent, underhanded, sneaky, illicit, illegal, cock and bull plan to make a buck to ever wear a Lamborghini badge. And that is saying something. Eurus!
Here we go.
This video is brought to you by the Haggerty Drivers Club, which includes a subscription to our award-winning magazine, 24/7 flatbed roadside assistance, and far more. Join or get more info at the link below.
All of that silliness aside, I don't even know where to begin with the LM002 story because it's all so insane. So let's start with all of the things you would never expect based on the way it looks.
First off, it's absolutely stellar to drive, even and especially on a twisty back road, cornering, as Automobile Magazine said, quote, like a sports car for King Kong.
Of course, it does have the widest front tires ever fitted to any production car ever. Those are 345 width, same at the rear. And it also has supercar-style, independent, double wishbone suspension at all four corners. This at a time when other luxury SUVs and trucks, like a Range Rover, hadn't yet even figured out crappy independent suspension.
It has a short-geared close-ratio ZF 5-speed dogleg manual out of an Aston Martin Vantage. And it has one Lamborghini part, other than the badges.
Taken straight out of the Countach, it's a 5.2-liter quad-cam, 48-valve, 7,000 RPM V12. Early versions like this one sucked through 6 twin-throat Weber carburetors, and it made 3 times the power of the then also new to the US V8-powered Range Rover.
The LM did weigh more than 2 Countaches, but its performance was staggering for the day. It beat that brand new Range Rover to 60 miles an hour by 5.5 seconds.
7.7 seconds to 60 and 16 flat through the quarter mile at 86 miles an hour made this not only the quickest truck the world had ever seen, but those numbers were dead nuts, identical to another 4-valve per cylinder, 7,000 RPM hot rod that the magazines had just called a super coupe to be reckoned with. It's that. It's a Scirocco 16-valve.
The LM did more than exactly match the Porsche-beating Volkswagen Scirocco 16-valves acceleration. Despite weighing literally 3 times as much, it stopped as quickly, too.
Once. Because while each of the LM's front wheels had 2 Range Rover 4-piston calipers, they both squeezed the same overworked 13-inch rotor. And the 12-inch drums at the back, the only drums ever fitted to a Lamborghini, would probably be on fire within milliseconds. Still, point is, that Volkswagen Scirocco 16-valve was 1987's hot hatch performance benchmark, and this land yacht could keep up with it in every measure.
Much has changed in the last 4 decades, chiefly that cars have gotten so big that the LM002 only looks large. In fact, it's within an inch in length, width, and wheelbase of today's totally normal-sized Land Rover Defender 110. In fact, the Lambo is 4.5 inches shorter in height.
The LM's cockpit is gorgeous. It is lined with wood and leather and genuinely would be perfect for a period Rolls-Royce if space wasn't considered a luxury, because somehow it is tiny in here. The seat is about as narrow as a pair of high-heel shoes. The steering wheel is so close to somehow both your knee and the dashboard that if you did try to turn the steering wheel quickly, it would break your fingers. And then the center console is wide enough to park a Countach on it.
The entire truck is full of outrageous contradictions. But if the job of a Lamborghini is to be outrageous, well, the LM might be the most Lamborghini of all Lamborghinis. Especially once you factor in how it all came to be.
The early 1970s were not kind to Italian supercar companies. Enzo had just sold half of Ferrari to Fiat in order to stay afloat, and by 1974, Ferruccio sold his entire stake in Lamborghini.
A year later, as Countach fever was taking over, the factory was ironically grinding to a halt. The company didn't have enough money to purchase new raw materials to build those new Countaches that people were impatiently waiting for.
Lamborghini's new owners, two clever Swiss guys, sent technical director Franco Berardini out into the world to find something, anything, to keep the money coming in and the factories buzzing. He came back with not the uno, but the due opportunità, which means two opportunities. Is it not clear?
One was an agreement to engineer and build a car for BMW Motorsport, the one that we came to know as the M1. Another was a project so outrageous that it reminded him of the Countach.
Lamborghini's parts supplier buddy, Chrysler, introduced Berardini to two of its associates from California who were looking for a partner to build their invention. This was a vehicle that they'd cooked up half a decade earlier while working for a company called FMC that was trying to win a very lucrative U.S. government contract to build vehicles for the CSVP, the Combat Support Vehicle Program.
The CSVP was a set of specifications for an off-road capable vehicle to replace the aging out M151 Jeep. FMC's proposal was called the XR311, and though there were a bunch of prototypes built, it all went absolutely nowhere, except Tamiya created a scale model RC car out of it.
After meeting with Berardini, Johnson and Ferris signed an agreement to have Lamborghini build their invention. It would give Lamborghini a revenue stream and keep its workers working. More importantly, according to Berardini, it would, quote, change everything. He had no idea.
The two now ex-FMC employees set up a new company called MTI, and at Lamborghini's expense built a prototype in California. It had four-wheel drive, a fiberglass body, a rear-mounted waterproofed Chrysler V8, and Lamborghini badges. They shipped it to Italy, Lamborghini dragged it to the 1977 Geneva Motor Show, and christened it the Lamborghini Cheetah.
It made quite the stir. Not just because what the hell was it doing on the Lamborghini stand, not just because it was really cool, and not just because the brochures were printed only in Arabic. Lamborghini's Swiss owners had connections in the Middle East and thought they too might be interested in the truck. But nobody was more interested than FMC, which took one look at the Cheetah and realized it amounted to little more than intellectual property theft on the part of two of its ex-employees, and therefore Lamborghini. And FMC sued.
But Tamiya once again recognized cool when it saw it and made an RC car out of the Cheetah too. But Lamborghini terminated its relationship with MTI and shipped the Cheetah back to the US.
This would have been a huge embarrassment for Lamborghini if it weren't for what came next. Lamborghini got a $1 million loan from the Italian government to help set up production facilities for the BMW M1, which would have saved the company. Instead, it diverted those funds into reverse engineering the Cheetah to try to sell it. And guess what? Didn't work.
Not only was the rear-engined off-roader dead for the third time, but the money for the M1 was gone, and so the BMW project was dead too, and Lamborghini was bankrupt and shamed.
BMW shows up in the middle of the night, breaks in, and steals its parts, prototypes, and tooling. You can learn more about that in our wonderful episode of Revelations on the BMW M1.
The Italian court takes control over Lamborghini in receivership, and it does whatever it can to keep the factory alive, including spitting out 5,000 off-road versions of the Fiat 127 called the Rust-ic-O, or Rustica, as it's pronounced in Italian.
But like any movie villain, this thing wasn't nearly as dead as you'd think. A couple years later, the Saudi Border Patrol comes knocking and says, hey, remember that SUV? We're interested. And then Kuwait says, we'd like to order 3,000 of them PDQ. Turns out, those Swiss guys had been pretty smart to print the brochures in Arabic.
The next year, Lamborghini is put under the control of a 24-year-old Patrick Mimran. 20-somethings in charge at Lamborghini is a common theme. Remember that the entire crew who invented the supercar 15 years earlier were also in their 20s. And Mimran, a fetus, of course thought the badass off-roader was cool AF. He'd probably seen this photo, so he starts development back up. Enter the LM001, LM for Lamborghini Military, one for its first in-house design. Except actually it wasn't in-house, it was yet another copy of the FMC design, just made much closer to new specs from the US military.
In the intervening years, the US government canceled that old CSVP program, the Jeep replacement, and in its place issued a contract proposal for $1.3 billion worth of Humvees.
High mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicle. The LM001 still had the engine in the back, but this time it was an AMC V8 because Mimran's family had ties with Renault, AMC's owner. In testing climbing a steep sand dune, famed Lamborghini test driver Valentino Balboni rolled one front over back at low speed.
Well, that finally ended the rear-engine mistake. Lamborghini threw out the stolen FMC MTI Cheetah design, moved the engine up front, re-engineered the whole thing, and created the LMA, Lamborghini Militaria Anteriore, or front. And up anteriore was finally a Lamborghini V12. The LMA proved unstoppable in tests conducted by Middle Eastern governments. It was the only submission that aced every single test, easily beating out the entrants from Toyota and Land Rover. And so, Lamborghini was so convinced that Kuwait was about to place that 3,000 unit order that it went ahead and pre-ordered 300 component sets. That was a big mistake.
War had broken out once again in the Middle East, and the government stopped messing about. To quote car and driver, expecting a squad of dropout draftees to field service 6 Webers and a 4-cam V12 would be like entrusting the Botswana Air Force with a space shuttle.
Offensive, not all draftees are dropouts.
Anyway, the LMA was dead once again, and the company was in trouble. Except it wasn't, and it wasn't. Chairman Mimran, now 25 years old, lined the LMA with wood and leather, dragged it to the 1982 Monaco Grand Prix to be seen by the Monegasque jet set, and photographed by Playboy and Penthouse. Everybody wanted in.
After building one prototype with a 7.3-liter version of Lamborghini's other V12, a marine unit, for production they settled on the new 5.2-liter Quattro Valvole from the Countach. It made 30 more horsepower and weighed far less anyway.
It was nicknamed LM002 by the press, a name that stuck. Its customers included royalty, Formula One drivers, Malcolm Forbes, Sylvester Stallone, the Sultan of Brunei, who had a wagon made out of his, and years later, one Miss Tina Turner.
Congratulations. You're the first to survive the audition.
Who couldn't see over the dashboard thanks to those 2 enormous intake humps. And Tina didn't like to drive a stick shift. In this case, I can't blame her, because Tina was known for her amazing legs, and if she had to deal with this clutch every day, her left leg would have been twice the size of her right. Turns out, Tina Turner didn't need another hero. She needed an automatic and smaller intakes.
So she had the engine and slush box from a wrecked Mercedes 500E swapped into hers. And by the way, it still hit 62 in 8.8 seconds and did 127 miles an hour. I know this is a total sidebar, but it was too cool not to talk about. All right, now back to the main story.
For the record, MTI wound up selling the Cheetah to Teledyne Continental Motors, where it went up against 2 other Humvee candidates, one from Chrysler and one from AM General, who used to make the M151 Jeep that went out of production that started this whole mess.
And the AM General design won the Humvee contract. they produced 281,000 units.
Lamborghini made just 301 LMs. And for sure, we know one of them no longer exists because the US military blew up Saddam's kid's blue one. They probably didn't even know what it was. Nobody knows what this thing is, except you, because you now know everything there is to know about the most Lamborghini Lamborghini to ever Lamborghini.